the last thing we wanted to get to today was one of our favorite things, and that's talking about recruiting and the all-star games that happen at the end of the cycle, where we broke down some stuff from the Under Armour All-American game last week. So if you haven't checked that out, have a couple of videos regarding that. And now we're going to get to the Navy All-American Bowl. Yes, it's not the Army All-American game anymore. It's the Navy All-American Bowl. So still there on NBC, and practices are going on this week. Day 2 of practice was yesterday. Some names. I wanted to get to some names that are sticking out and play some video, some of the stuff from practice. But again, just like the Under Armour game, you're getting a cool look at things because the underclassmen, so the juniors for the top guys for next year's class, are competing against the top guys for this year's class that most of them are going to be enrolling in school here in the next week.
Yeah, first of all, it's weird. There's a lot of change, right? So number one, it's the Navy game now. It's not the Army game, so that's different. And then, of course, the fact that both the Under Armour and the Navy game have 25 and 26 players playing together. Totally unique situation, and I think really, really good for scouting purposes to understand who's for real, who needs some work, kind of where guys are at in their development. Of course, they're not finished products. None of these guys are finished products, but certainly the 26 guys, they got plenty of room to grow. So if they struggle, you don't get too concerned. Maybe you see where they could use some work. But the guy who's definitely not struggling in that class of 26, Jazavian Currence, South Carolina commit. A lot of comps to Nick Emmanwori. Of course, South Carolina standout on his way to the NFL. 6'3", 205 from Rock Hill, South Point. Number 1 overall player in South Carolina, number 7 safety, number 93 overall. So you watch him in high school, just watching his highlights, plays a lot of quarterback, two-way guy. You do see ability when he's on defense to break on the ball, kind of read routes, and just have a natural feel for jumping things, right? That's what stands out from his defensive clips. He's physical, but he's not like busting people's heads consistently. He does have some nice hits, but it's not like he's like a box safety necessarily.
Hey, he does that exactly right here in this clip from practice, though. He jumps this right here.
So. Right. And look, what you like about it is a big defensive back. What's your worry? When the pads are off and you're moving around, he's going to look pretty bad, right? Because his strength is going to be more the physical side given his size. But when you have a guy like that excelling in skeletons at the All-America level, you say, wow, his cover skills might be further ahead than we thought. And we know he's got the size. And even though, again, he's not a box safety, he's not like a Cam Chancellor type, he can lay the wood on occasion, and he just has the natural size. So just comment here from 247, said he was clean throughout one-on-one and pass skeleton, but turned it up to another level during the team portion of the joint practice in the Alamodome. He finished the day with multiple passes broken up, including a batted pass on a blitz that resulted in interception. He possesses a rare combination of traits, that's that size and movement, and coverage savvy that made him one of the more successful defensive backs on the day. Still early in the week, but he's been impressive going against seniors. So that coverage savvy shows you maybe this guy is not going to grow into a linebacker just because he's over 205 pounds as a junior. Maybe he's just a natural defensive back that happens to be in a big body. On 3, very similar comments, always around the football, had the pass breakup, used his length to bat down balls, and also came screaming off the edge at one point, making a tackle on Alvin Henderson. So he does show you that run stopping ability as well. Could be mistaken for a linebacker, but his range and instincts were on display. That's from on 3. So both services that were out there had a lot of love for Currence. If you're a South Carolina fan, you shocked the world a little bit last year with Dylan Stewart, who was not necessarily from your direct recruiting area, ended up being a Gamecock and one of the best players in the SEC, maybe the best defensive player in the country next year, certainly from a talent standpoint. I don't know if there's too many guys I would take over Dylan Stewart. That was such a big win. Of course, the offensive success. Dow Loggins on his way to Appalachian State, but you're bringing Mike Shuley. You expect that to kind of keep rolling with the starting quarterback in place and Lenore Sellers. South Carolina's got a lot to be excited about. And by the way, some of these other names that we're about to mention, South Carolina's name pops up in their recruitment as well.
Yeah, the next guy we want to talk about here is Darius Gray. And to me, in a lot of the clips that I saw, was maybe the most impressive guy that I've seen. 6'3", 285, and this is a 2026 kid. But this is what 247 had to say. The number 41 prospect in the 2026 recruiting cycle was perfect during the morning session at Trinity University in one-on-ones and continued his hot run of form throughout the joint practice at the Alamo Dome. Gray is a bully at the point of attack and has the anchor strength to halt defenders in the tracks from the interior. Another element of Gray's game that translated from tape to San Antonio is his balance and reactionary quickness. Even when Gray gets knocked off balance, he's quick to recover and finish the rep in impressive fashion. And man, I'll play some clips here now, but this does not look like a guy who still has over a year before he steps on a college campus.
Yeah, super quick. Not the biggest guy in the world, as far as size, right? Even at the high school level, he doesn't look massive. He's listed at 6'3", 285, maybe a little bit, but super athletic, highly rated, right? Four-star player nationally, number 3 interior offensive lineman, number 2 in Virginia from St. Christopher's in Richmond, Virginia. But just watching the highlights, both his basketball highlights when he's grabbing double-double after double-double, and then his football highlights where he's playing not only offensive line, but also playing on the defensive line and making plays in the backfield. He's just a super athletic kid. I mean, you see how easily he bends there. Yeah, the stomach, I mean, for a defensive lineman or an interior offensive lineman, I mean, that stomach's pretty flat. I'm kind of jealous, I got to be honest. But this guy can really move. And he's just a football player, highly productive, both sides of the ball. Didn't play elite competition, but the finishing. Look at him take out the ref and the defensive player on the same play. You see that all over his highlights. He's taking guys outside the frame. He's a big-time finisher. And because of his athleticism, he can really get to that second level quick. I think the fact that, you knew he was a good player, but then with his size, being able to go to this level of competition and still perform, I think that's very encouraging. He's only going to get bigger, and the athleticism is clearly there.
Bryce Perry-Wright, defensive lineman from Buford, Georgia, is someone else who was really sticking out according to the reports out there. And to me, it looks like a guy with a really, really high motor. And sometimes in the camp settings, as you see some of these clips here, but in the camp settings, that motor is a lot to handle.
Yeah, and look, this is a highly rated defensive tackle from Georgia, right? So usually with those guys, you expect, your Justice Terrys or your Elijah Griffins that just look like a different species. This guy doesn't necessarily, right? He's not the biggest guy. You see him there, 6'3", 260. Maybe he's an end. I think probably more of a smaller defensive tackle. 45th player nationally in the class of 26. Number 2 defensive lineman, number 7 player in Georgia. Got Auburn, Clemson, and Arkansas in the mix. Watch him at Buford. He's playing all over the line, down lineman at all spots, also playing stand-up rusher. But the guy's just a good football player. You see it here. Even though he's not the tallest guy in the world, maybe closer to 6'1", his length is ridiculous for that size. He has a crazy wingspan. He knows how to use his arms, knows how to use his hands. Good athlete, functional athlete. So, I think defensive line this year, from what my initial kind of just glance at some of these players, the defensive line doesn't, to me, look as loaded as it was last year in the class of 25, where you just had multiple war daddies. The guys that look like the Jalen Carters of the world, right? Those first-round defensive lineman type bodies. You saw that last year. I don't know if you're seeing that as much early on in this class, but what you do have are some really good football players. And I think Perry-Wright is an example of somebody who he just makes plays. He comes from an elite program at Buford. The length of the arms makes up for some of the size deficiencies. And you could send him to a place like this, Navy All-America game, and he'll make plays against the best competition available.
Next guy we want to talk about here, Malik Autry, defensive tackle, headed to Auburn. And you can feel the power in some of these videos, man. A strong interior lineman. This is impressive stuff here. Like I said, you see how big he is. And it's one thing to be big, but to be able to play with that leverage. He's tall, too, as you can see there. So, man, a guy who could probably make an impact right away at Auburn.
Yeah, we were talking about how the 25 class seem to have more of those true war daddies. This is one of them. So this is a 25 kid who is going to Auburn as a 4-star signee. I think he's a 5-star on 247. I'm not sure how this guy is not a 5-star on the composite, man, because you're 6'5.5", verified, almost 340 pounds. And, he's not a sloppy player. I mean, he looks athletic. He has, he has a good frame, though bad weight's not there. I'm surprised that this is not a 5-star player, like a top 15, top 20 type player. Maybe there are some inconsistencies on tape that is not uncommon for these big dominant guys. But when you put sometimes these guys that in high school, they can, I don't say coast, but they can dominate without effort. you put him against better competition and they really turn it on. And you see that here with Autry. He's going against the best, and then boom, he takes it to another level.
Look, we talk about the power, but look at the quicks there.
Yeah, I think this is a guy who, if you put him in the 26 class with the same film, same specs, probably closer to a 5-star player, just because there's not that many guys like this around the country. They seem to be more concentrated in the Southeast. That's why the SEC has been the most successful conference over the past few years. And this is your classic war daddy. There's a program that produced Derek Brown, other just pure monsters on the D-line, Nick Fairley. So they're used to having these kind of war daddies. And I think this was a huge, huge, huge recruiting win for Auburn, which has been kicking butt in the state of Alabama. Alabama had a great recruiting class, went out to California to get good players, went out to Texas to get good players, really showed their national footprint. But if you're talking about Alabama, the state of Alabama, which has a ton of talent, Auburn has become the top dog in recent years of keeping these guys home. And this is one of those big victories for the Auburn Tigers.
Man, coach needed to use his footwork a little bit better there, man. He couldn't do anything about that freight train. He saw ghosts here though for a second. Golly.
Yeah, they got it. Listen, that's when you got power, when everybody in the line of the play is in danger because of that knockback. He's got it.
Kaliq Lockett, next one that we're going to talk about here out of Texas. This is a 5-star and a receiver who can really go up and get the ball.
Yeah, super productive. Just watching him in high school on tape, 6'2", 175, but he looks bigger than that. 6'7" wingspan, huge hands. He could snatch it. 5-star composite player from Saxon, Texas. Texas commit, joining Jamie French in a really talented wide receiver room. Of course, it's Texas. They've been throwing the ball with a lot of success lately. Isaiah Bond, just the latest guy to go on to the NFL. But I mean, this is exactly what you saw in high school. The ability to go up and get it, the wingspan, the big hands. One thing that jumped out to me about Lockett is he has a really good balance. He's some of these guys, they're sort of these tall, long track star guys. They just run straight lines and that's it. And then you knock them on balance. It's like, it's like a baby deer. They just kind of fall over. That's not Lockett. He can't take contact. He can't keep his feet. And then of course he could do this, just run right by guys and do, and show his speed and tracking ability. But I think when you get a skinnier guy like this, you worry what's going to happen when they're going against bigger defensive backs. Of course, these are not college defensive backs, but they are bigger than the average high school player just because of their physical specs, their recruiting ranking. So his ability to deal with bigger players, bigger defensive backs, stronger defensive backs at this event, I think is a very good sign that he could play early for Texas. It's just going to be about putting on weight. You got Ryan Wingo, a sensational freshman there, but you're replacing a lot. Matthew Golden's been outstanding for Texas this year. Of course, Isaiah Bond, who's been banged up lately, but is a dynamic player. A lot of reps to go around at Texas. There's a lot of blue chippers in the mix. Jamie French, we mentioned, from Florida, from Jacksonville, another elite player coming into this recruiting class at receiver. But I think Kaliq Lockett, with his production, with his measurables, if the weight can come on, you expect him to make an instant impact at Texas, just like Ryan Wingo did.
Brandon Lee, who I think is a Nebraska fan, appreciate your support. Brandon says, apparently Cortez Mills was beating everyone yesterday. Cortez Mills, someone that you and I are familiar with, plays down here in Miami. And we've seen him up close, not only in live game action, but in camps. And I'm going to pull up a clip here that I just found. Looks very familiar to what we're used to seeing. I've always thought his body control was some of the best in the country.
Yeah, Cortez Mills. Around this time last year, we were seeing him on the camp circuit here in Miami.
Look at him float there.
He's gained some weight. You can tell just looking at him but with a lot of times with Dade County receivers, the weight is not there at the high school level. They really make physical gains in college. That's why a lot of them are like 3 stars that become impact players because they just gain weight. You think of like a Lamar Jackson, right? The most classic example. But Cortez Mills has always thrived in these settings. He's been playing with the best 7-on-7 players at Raw Miami. A lot of 5-star players, both on both sides of the ball in that program and the programs that they play. So he's not used to, he's not a stranger to this level of competition. Very productive at Homestead. Had a huge year as a junior statistically when Homestead made a run there into the state playoffs. Had a big game against St. Thomas Aquinas as well. So again, not surprised that when you put him here with some good competition, he thrives. My big question with Cortez Mills: can he go to Nebraska? It's always tricky when Miami guys go that far away to certainly a much different environment, in Lincoln, Nebraska than Miami, Florida. Go there, take care of his business, put on weight, and thrive. It's happened before. You've seen guys like Levante David just flourish at Nebraska from Miami, Florida. So if Mills can just do that, gain weight, really lock into strength and conditioning and the finer points of route running, kind of getting away from that 7-on-7 style route running, he can be a big-time player.
Yeah, without a doubt. And look, it worked for Ja'Cory Barney last year. He had a really good freshman season, and someone that I know Cornhusker fans are excited about. So last guy we want to talk about here in terms of Navy All-American practices, and that's Amari Adams, 2025 Clemson commit from Florence, South Carolina. A big-time defensive lineman with major athletic ability. And this is more what we're used to seeing in terms of the guys that Clemson needs to bring in.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is you look at the rankings, it's shocking to see the Clemson's never been like a Georgia or an Ohio State that recruits, top 5 classes. They've always kind of stayed in that, 8 to 15 range, and those were always really, really good players that they would get. It was pretty shocking last year when you looked at the rankings, and Clemson finishes 27th in the recruiting rankings. So they didn't take a ton of players; they only took 15 players, but that was a shock to me, right? They've always kind of taken a small amount of players and hit at a high rate of quality. That number of a ranking, which again doesn't say how they're going to play, that was a bit of a shock. But this guy right here is exactly what Clemson made their name off of. Just great defensive lineman, first-round defensive lineman. That's what allowed them to bridge the gap with the SEC. Of course, the quarterback position was a strength as well, and wide receiver. But there were 3 parts to Clemson's success if you really look at the 2 national championships: the elite quarterback, the elite receivers, and then that position right there. You talk about Christian Wilkins. You talk about Dexter Lawrence. Doesn't get any better than that. So Amari Adams fits into that. Is a basketball player with production on the basketball court, very fluid and athletic. He has a shot put background as well. You see some of the power in those clips, that power through his hands. He does that as a multi-sport guy. So, good frame, long arms. He just sort of fits with what we're used to seeing, like you said, Pete, at that position for the Clemson Tigers. You look at the playoff game against Texas. I mean, Texas did whatever they wanted to do in the running game, which was really the difference in that game. And Texas did not do the same against Arizona State, which is kind of shocking if you think about it, that a Texas team could run at will against Clemson and had much less success against Arizona State. I think that speaks a lot to where Clemson needs to get better, where they need to recruit better, where they need to win battles. This one right here, a huge battle, and he is going to the Navy All-America game and performing and showing, what he can do. But you see the body type, the long arms, the lack of bad weight, the ability to gain weight, and then the fluidity of that basketball background.
Andrew Ivins in the tweet that went with this video says he's looking like a day 1 player for the Tigers. He's looking like a day 1 NFL draft pick in 3 years too.
And that's what they used to do. They got to get back to that. Even going back to Brian Breezy, that wasn't even that long ago. So you got to get back to producing guys like this if you're Clemson. Otherwise, you're going to see games like Texas where they just overwhelm you up front.
Well, excited to see that game this weekend, and we'll keep you updated here on Group Chat Football Live on the practices the rest of the week. Appreciate everyone who was on here live with us. Have had a great crowd once again, and we really love these interactions, love the comments, love the questions, and everyone who's been supporting the page as we continue to grow this thing. Please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you guys tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.